question is about calculating gains from trade, but using equations rather than starting with the graph. Okay, so here is the question. Burnaby and Coquitlam produce sandwiches and boots. Their production possibilities are given by the following functions. Okay, now before we deal with the rest of it, let's just deal with these functions here. And what we'll do is draw a graph from those functions. Okay, so over here I have graphs roughly drawn, but what we want to know is what are the intercepts. Okay, so we'll start with Burnaby. So the function for Burnaby, so the quantity of sandwiches equals 1,920 minus 2 times the quantity of boots. All right, so what this means is that when the quantity of boots is 0, the quantity of sandwiches would then just be 1920, and that will be this number over here. All right, so this would be 1920. Let's move this line up a bit. There we go. All right, so in other words, that is when the quantity of boots is 0. Now, when the quantity of sandwiches is 0, so when the quantity of sandwiches is 0, now our question is, what's this number? What is the quantity of boots? So, using the equation, okay, so our equation is QS equals 1920 minus 2QB. Okay, so our question is, what is QB when the quantity of sandwiches is 0? Okay, so let's put 0 there. 0 equals 1920 minus 2QB. All right, now we can bring the negative 2QB over to the other side. 1920, and now we can get QB by itself by dividing both sides by 2. Put that in. There. All right. Okay, so this 2 and this 2 will cancel out. So we're left with QB equals 1920 divided by 2. So 960. Good. So that will be this number right here. Okay, so now we'll do the same thing for Coquitlam. All right, so starting with when the quantity of boots is 0, what will be the quantity of sandwiches? So if this is 0, then the quantity of sandwiches will just be 1,400. Okay, so that'll be, oops. There we go, so 1,400. Let me just move this down a little bit. There we go. And now here, this number here. So this will be when the quantity of sandwiches is 0. What's the quantity of boots? There we go. Okay. All right, so when the quantity of sandwich is 0, what's the quantity of boots? So put 0 here. And now we'll take this term to the other side. And now we want QB by itself, so we're going to divide both sides by 1.4. And now this 1.4 and this 1.4 will cancel out. So we're left with QB equals 1400 divided by 1.4. So that'll be 1000. Okay, and then that will be this number right here. There. Okay, so now we have our graphs drawn. Let's get rid of that again. Now back to the question. So we're given information here about before trade. Burnaby is producing and consuming 1,000 sandwiches and 460 boots. And before trade, Coquitlam is producing and consuming 728 sandwiches and 480 boots. All right. Okay, so what I've done here is I've put these points on the graphs. These are showing the points on the production possibility curves where the two cities are before they trade. So these are the points that they are producing and also what they're consuming. Okay, so now for trading, what we have to do first is figure out who's going to do what. Okay, so they decide to specialize in trade based on comparative advantage. Now, comparative advantage, as you guys now know, is based on the opportunity costs of production. We need to know who has a lower opportunity cost for sandwiches and who will have the lower opportunity cost for boots. And it will always be one or the other. So we'll calculate the opportunity costs for each city and then figure out who's got the lower cost for the two different goods. Okay, so we'll start with Burnaby. Now, for Burnaby, if they want to make boots, we can use these numbers here. They could make a total maximum of 960 boots. But to do that, they would have to not make any sandwiches. So they would have to give up 1920 sandwiches. Okay, so they would give up 1,920 sandwiches to get 960 boots. Okay, so then we simplify that. So that will be 2 sandwiches per pair of boots. Now we could go the other way. If they only want to make sandwiches, they could make a maximum of 1920, but they would have to make no boots, so they would give up 960 boots. Okay, so they would give up 960 boots to get 1920 sandwiches. And that works out to 0.5 boots per sandwich. Okay, now let's do Coquitlam. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. Now, for boots, they could make a maximum of 1,000, but they would not be able to make any sandwiches. So they would give up 1,400 sandwiches. Okay, so they would give up 1,400 sandwiches to get 1,000 boots. So that is 1.4 sandwich per boots. And then we'll go the other way. If they want to make sandwiches, they could make 1,400, but they would give up all 1,000 boots. So they would give up 1,000 boots to get 1,400 sandwiches. And now, okay, so now that's not a whole number, or not even a nice number, 0.7, let's say 714. We'll just leave it at that. That's all we need. Boots per sandwich. Good. Okay. Now, who's got the lower costs. So first for Boots, Burnaby's costs for Boots are 2 sandwiches per Boots, and Coquitlam is only 1.4 per Boots. All right, so that tells us that they have the comparative advantage making Boots. So let's highlight that. Now, for sandwiches, Burnaby gives up 0.5 Boots per sandwich, and Coquitlam 0.714. Okay, so that one's bigger. This one here is smaller. So Burnaby has a lower cost for making sandwiches. Okay, so let's write this down. Okay, so Burnaby has a comparative advantage in sandwiches because 0.5 Boots per sandwich is less than 0.714 Boots per sandwich. Okay, Coquitlam has a comparative advantage in Boots because their cost of 1.4 sandwich per Boots is less than the cost for Burnaby, which is 2 sandwiches per boot. Good. Okay, so Burnaby will make sandwiches, Coquitlam will make Boots. Now, how much will they make? Okay, so Burnaby's going to make sandwiches, only sandwiches. And if they produce the maximum possible number of sandwiches, that will be here, 1,920. Okay, let me highlight that in pink. And then Coquitlam is only going to make Boots. And if they only make Boots, they can make a maximum of 1,000 Boots. All right, so those are their production points now. Okay, let's go back to the question. Okay, so they have decided to specialize in trade based on comparative advantage. So now we know who's going to make what. We know how much they're going to make. Now they trade, and so we look for the information about the terms of trade. They agree to trade 780 sandwiches for 492 Boots. Okay, so this is what we call the terms of trade. Okay. So let's just figure out how much they will have after they do this. And then we'll look at the final part of the question. Okay. Okay, so we'll start with Burnaby. 1920 sandwiches. And they give how many? Let's go back here. How many sandwiches? 780. They give 780 sandwiches to, oops, How many sandwiches will they have left? Okay, so Burnaby will have, so now we have to subtract. They produced 1920, they give away 780 equals, how many do they have left? Let's do that. So they have 1,140 sandwiches left. And how many, what do they get in return? They get Boots. How many Boots? They get 492 Boots in return. They will receive 492 So that's what they get to consume. They're going to have this many sandwiches, and they're going to have this many boots. All right, so now for Coquitlam. Just erase this here. I can type it. Good. Okay, so now for Coquitlam. So they will produce 1,000 boots, and they will give, how many boots? Oh, well, 492. 492 boots to Burnaby. And how many do they have left? Okay, so Coquitlam will have, now we have to subtract. They made 1,000 boots. They give 492 to Coquitlam. So how many left? That will be 508. Okay. And they also get to consume the sandwiches, which were given by Burnaby. It was 780 that they got. Good. All right. So now, first of all, notice that both of the cities get more than they had before. So Burnaby has 1,140 sandwiches, whereas before trade they only had 1,000. And boots, they get 492, which is more than what they had before, which was 460. Coquitlam has now 508 boots, whereas they only had 480 before. And sandwiches, they get 780, which is more than the 728 that they had before. Okay, so now the gains from trade. And let me just erase some of this. Okay, gains from trade. Okay, so let's start with Burnaby. And sandwiches. Okay, so with trade, they have 1,140 sandwiches. Before trade, they had 1,000. So they have 140 more sandwiches. Okay, and now boots. So with trade, they got 492. And before trade, they had 460. So that's 32 more boots. Okay, now let's do Coquitlam. Now let's see, sandwiches. They have 780 now, and they had 728 before. Okay, so that is 52 more sandwiches. And boots. Okay, boots, they have 508 now. They had 480 before. So that's an extra 28. Good, so these are their gains from trade. And so now we can finally answer the question, which was, How many more boots will Coquitlam have with trade compared to without trade? So that's asking for the gains from trade in terms of boots for Coquitlam. And now we finally have our answer. 28. They will have 28 more boots.